Welcome to Popcorn Psychology, the podcast where we watch blockbuster movies and psychoanalyze them. My name is Brittany Brownfield, and I'm a child therapist, and I'm joined by...
Ben Stover, individual therapist.
Hannah Espinoza, marriage and family therapist.
We are all licensed clinical professional counselors, also known as therapists, who practice out of Chicago. Even though we are licensed mental health professionals, this podcast is purely for entertainment purposes and to fulfill our love of dissecting pop culture in all forms.
Please remember that even though we are all licensed therapists, we aren't your therapist.
If you are struggling with mental health symptoms, please find a local mental health provider.
All right, welcome to our 50th episode, our 50th full episode. This is the second and last of our series in the Christmas/holiday season for 2020, which means we're almost at the end of this shithole of a year. So hooray for that.
Woo! Fuck yeah. Woo!
And in honor of that, today we're going to be doing one of the happiest movies on the entire planet and hopefully try to keep it that way. We're going to be doing Elf today.
Yay! Friggin' love Elf.
And in honor of us doing Elf, we have a special guest. We have Megan Clausen joining us from The Ultimate Elf.
Da-da-da-da.
So, Megan, tell us a little bit about you so that our listeners know who this extra voice is today.
Yes, so hello. I am so excited to be here. I have had a Christmas decorating business. It's a family business. We've been doing it for like 20 years. And we go into houses and we decorate them for the holidays. And we have just done residential for the past 15 years. And then just recently we started doing restaurants as well. So it's a whole other ball game there with that, with doing commercial. But yeah, really fun. Lots of people we meet, lots of basements we go in, lots of Christmas stuff we have to put up. So yeah, it's a good time.
And their work is excellent. If you're in Chicago and you went to any of the bars in the Four Corners group last year and the year before, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Megan and her team did
elves.
All of that. Megan and her elves. So we decided to bring Megan in to talk about one of the topics we're going to cover today. So the topics we're going to cover today are working on cultural norms versus mental illness, adoption/being in a different community. Then we're going to talk about work-life balance and holiday decorating with holiday spirit and the environmental impact on stress and mood.
That sounds heavy, but I like it. It's great.
So excited to have you, Megan. I'm excited to hear all about it.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited to do this. This is, thank you to Ben for thinking about me with this. This is really cool.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you. This is the first time we've had another guest on our show in person.
Whoa!
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
That is true. You're right.
We had a lot planned for 2020, and believe it or not, it didn't pan out.
Yeah.
No, there were supposed to be several more episodes. It just, didn't.
Got away from us. Just got away from us.
Because we, like everybody else, had days where we just were like, do you guys feel like recording? No. All right, good.
Yeah.
I want to stay in my house under blankets and pretend the world is gone.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we all had days like that. But let's get into Elf here, because this movie has made me happy ever since the first day I saw it. I wasn't even a Will Ferrell fan too much, other than like SNL. I hadn't really got into much things, but this movie, he is just so irresistibly like positive and happy that it just feels like Christmas to me. So I'm very happy to be doing this movie.
And Ben, what would you say is the plot of Elf if you had to give it to the audience?
Now, see, normally, Brittany, when we ask me what the plot is, it can get into a lengthy discussion. So instead, I'm going to go ahead and reflect that question right back to you and ask you what the plot of Elf is, because this is something you're very good at.
Is a little baby human, is living in an orphanage when he's, like I said, an infant. One night on Christmas, Santa comes, he sneaks into Santa's little bag, and then gets taken to North Pole where he gets raised. still as a human amongst the elves. And then when he is, I think, 30 years old, he finally gets told that he is a human and not an elf, and who his birth dad is, and his birth mom had passed away. So he goes to New York to meet his new dad, or his old dad, I guess, and James Caan, and tries to immerse himself, I guess, in what we would call the human world and just, shenanigans. Classic shenanigans where he just is acting like a weirdo all over the place because he's from, the North Pole. And then he falls in love. And then, they have to bring Spirit up for, Santa's sleigh and all that stuff. How was that?
Perfect.
That sums it up. I think so, yeah.
See, I told you, you're just
better.
so good at it.
Yeah, that was a lot better than Wikipedia, too. Wikipedia was wordy.
Yeah.
It usually is.
We tried to use that, I think, or even IMDb, and it's long as fuck.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's remind ourselves of what we saw in this movie and get a different perspective. Nope. TLDR.
So I think what we see right away, obviously, is kind of the crux of the movie is that he is a fish out of water, Will Ferrell's character, Buddy. And physically, he's a fish out of water. He's 3 times as big as all of his peers in the North Pole. And, like I said, one of the topics we really want to touch upon was the idea of cultural norms versus, I guess, being diagnosed with a mental illness. And then also amongst that, what it's like to be quote unquote different in the community in which you're raised. And I think one of the things I noticed right away in terms of that is the movie opens up with him in North Pole, and he's trying really hard to be a good elf and make a lot of Christmas toys. And he immediately, you can tell that he is really struggling with himself because he just isn't at the same level as the elves because he's different skills, right? He's a human being. He's not an elf. So he can't make things as fast. They say, how many
cotton-headed Niggy Muffin.
Yes, he calls himself that. He's so hard on himself. They keep trying to move him. It seems like they move him around a lot in terms of his job because he's just not very good at it. And he hears people talking about him, unfortunately, and basically saying that everyone has to pick up the slack for his lack of ability. And it really made me think of the Albert Einstein quote, which I'm going to possibly say slightly wrong, which is if you judge a fish by how well it rides a bicycle, you're going to think it's pretty stupid. And it really made me think of how if you judge him by how well he is as an elf, of course he's not going to, pass that test very well. And you can definitely tell he's been judging himself by the standards of an elf his whole life, which has really seemed to have an impact on his self-esteem. And it made me think of all the kids that I work with who are quote unquote neuroatypical, which is they have ADHD, they have dyslexia, they're on the autism spectrum. And instead of recognizing their strengths and figuring out how as the community or as the learning space, how to best fit them and best kind of assess them, we force them square pegs into circular holes. And then we basically have a dramatic impact on their self-esteem because we're judging them as a fish by how well it rides a bicycle instead of how well it can swim in the ocean. And it made me feel really sad for Buddy.
Well, and also just taking into, I don't know if this is silly to point out, but also that he's also using tools and a bunch of shit that is not made for how big he is.
Yes.
So also his hands aren't as nimble because they're not as tiny. And so also everything is set up for someone who is 3 times small.
3 times smaller than him.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, he can't sit in his chair comfortably. They show him using a shower and using a bed. And I know it's all for comic relief, but it really would make you think you wouldn't think the world around me too small and isn't accommodating me. You would think I'm just too big.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Especially a kid. They're not going to have the capacity to judge themselves when they see everyone else fits the world. They're going to assume they're the one that doesn't fit, not the world isn't fitting them.
Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely.
And so it kind of makes me think and maybe this is a question to posit to the rest of you, like, was Papa Elf doing him a disservice by waiting 30 years is a long time to not tell someone that they are a different, I guess, species than the community in which they're raised in. Just kind of, I don't know, like keeping that information from Buddy. I mean, he's still a pretty happy person, but it makes me wonder how differently he would think of himself and his self-esteem if he had known at a younger age that he was just different, but not in like a weird way when people say you're just special and it sounds like an excuse.
Which they definitely did to him.
Yes.
Silly Ralphie from Christmas Story was the one who told him he was special.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Wouldn't it have been nice if he had told him that he was adopted and that he just was a real person living in an elf world, and then they could take his skills? I mean, he could have like built huge houses for them, and he could have built all of these things that for them would have been, unbelievably, unrealistic to make, but he could have done it for them easily. He could have built these huge snow forts and stuff for these little elves to play in if they had embrace the fact that he was different. Sad.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and instead he just has to, I think the only thing they use him for is like changing what they say, the
light bulbs
in the
or
smoke
something.
detector.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I know.
And they do mention all that to him, right? And then like they go like, and you bring us down a whole octave. In a good way.
Yeah.
Like they tried to give him compliments, which I feel like is nicer than maybe would have happened in another situation, like with the North Pole, where even though they're critical of him, they're all trying to be as positive as they can about him to his face. Mm-hmm. And like where they try to make the comments about picking up the slack, it's just another like evidence of him not fitting in the world. Is had he been an elf, he never would have heard that.
Mm-hmm.
Because he was like sticking his heads up like over the wall because he doesn't fit where they are.
Right.
Yeah, and it does make you wonder why they didn't try to make any accommodations for him. Like, why doesn't he have just like his own house that has things that fit him?
I think it's because Megan said it's because Papa Elf kept up the illusion that he was just a big elf. Mm-hmm. And wanted him to feel like everybody else. And I think that's the mistake that happens in these situations is people just want them to feel like a normal kid and be like everybody else, but you're not. And everyone knows it.
What if they were to have told him, hey, listen, okay, so this happened to you. You are a human and you are living in an elf world. We are going to embrace the fact that you are a human. You fly on down to the world and you can be like an undercover elf and you can like get to know people who you're not sure if they're going to be on the naughty or nice list, and you get to know them, and then you tell Santa because you got it in with both sides, right? Darn.
Absolutely. Well, because that would be giving him meaning, right? That would be giving him a purpose. It's something that he could successfully accomplish. I mean, I think also the other part of him overhearing something also just reminds me of the fact that kids hear everything.
Yeah.
Kids listen to your conversations. Half the time these days, some of the kids I work with, they'll tell me something about coronavirus, for example, and they'll tell me something and I'm like, there's no way that you're watching something that says that. I'm like, so where'd you hear that? Oh, I heard my mom talking to a coworker on the phone, and that's what, and I'm like, yeah, exactly. Like, so it's also, I feel like that piece of, kids are listening and they're aware of what is going on, and just trying to be aware of that as a parent in terms of how, whenever you talk about what's going on with your kid.
Yeah.
I mean, having a 2-year-old, I would tell you, like, the things that they know and say are fascinating. They know so much more than you think you did. Like, we're doing the Elf on the Shelf with Ava, who's my child, and she told my wife and I, she's like, she named him Jack, and she said, like, Jack is going to tell Santa what I want for Christmas. And we're like, did we tell you that? did we? She put all of that together by herself. Mm-hmm. Like we did not say that. the book did, but we didn't. And they digest things. They're very observant. And, like trying to tell a kid that, I'm just going to guess what the conversation between him and Papa Elf was at times that people have, were noticing that he's bigger than everybody else by a lot, is that, like, no, buddy, you're just a little different than everybody else. Instead of going like, yeah, you're different because this, and that's okay. Like Megan is saying, like, had you just normalized it from the get-go, he'd have that as part of his identity that, oh no, this is just who I am. And I'm, not the same. So I'm not expected to be the same. So I don't hold myself to the same standards that don't apply to me. And if you can help a kid understand that, like the same standards that are applying to this don't even apply to you. So you don't need to hold yourself to that. They'll work on actualizing in another way that makes sense to them, their skills and who they are. And I feel like Buddy was failed in that way.
He didn't let his freak flag fly.
Because kids are...
and then
and
he had
also,
to go
kids are really flexible and they're much more resilient than we realize. And so, it's kind of, the bigger conversation we're kind of, talking around is the idea of adoption. And I know that's a big hot button question with adoption, which is, when do we tell our kid that they're adopted? And for some people, that's part of their story for as long as they can remember. And it allows them then to, like you were saying, Ben, assimilate that into their personality. And then it's very different in the Buddy kind of situation, where Buddy kind of makes me more think of adoption circumstances where someone is adopted from a different ethnic group, or a different race, and they get adopted transracially. And so then it's quite obvious that they're not the same as their family, and yet no one still really talks about it, or kind of honors, like you were kind of even saying before, letting him kind of dip his toe into the human world much earlier. It's kind of the idea of when you adopt a child who is from a different background, letting them kind of experience their birth, I guess their racial identity, by letting them immerse themselves in the culture in which they were born, to kind of assimilate all of that into who they are, instead of casting off part of who they are to try to 100% assimilate into the family and the community they've been adopted into.
Well said.
Yeah.
I think that's important. I know, Hannah, you had mentioned you did a research project on that in school about adoption, right?
I did. Yeah. So one of the things, there was a lot of different articles and shit that I read, but one of the books that I found was a book called 20 Things I Wish My Adopted Parents Knew. 20 things that I wish they would have known before we were adopted. And the first chapter is about wanting to be told as soon as possible so that they could help, just so that they could understand what was going on, because it's also that kids know that they're don't look the same as everybody else. You don't have to point that out to them. They realize that. And that also, it's hard because then it also puts them in the position of having to bring it up when, and one of the other things is that normalizing talking about their birth parents, whatever their story is, because you don't want, because sometimes what can happen is that the kid can feel like if they bring it up, they're going to hurt their adopted parents' feelings. And they don't want to do that. And so if you don't give them, if you make it so they're responsible to bring it up and point it out, you're also putting them up in a position where they feel bad because they feel like they're hurting you. So really normalizing and talking about it, because just because you don't talk about it doesn't mean it's not fucking happening. Realize this. People are going to say shit to them. People said shit to me because I don't look like my mother. I'm not adopted. I just don't fucking look like her. And people would say shit all the time. So it's one of those things where you're not, and I knew that I didn't look like my mom. I wasn't fucking surprised when that happened. So it's also just being aware of how important it is to let your kid know, start their story with them as soon as it feels like they can understand. And that holding on to that and ignoring it feels like you're ignoring a piece of them. And then they have to figure that piece out on their own.
And
that
kids
feels,
they'll fill in all those holes too with their
they
own
will.
information that might be wrong or just misguided.
Absolutely. They'll start making stories about, I cannot deal with this. Hold on.
Hannah has a cat visitor right now.
Just being a fucking asshole as usual.
Is she a cat? Because then that makes sense.
Hilarious, Ben. You're so funny.
I know. There was some venom in that, Hannah. Damn.
So just, I think that's one of the things that I thought of, and also just thinking about in general of whenever we take somebody out of a situation and dump them back into something that they're not accustomed to at all, they're going to seem out of place. They're going to seem, it's going to be hard. And that sometimes I've definitely heard stories in grad school from people who have been practitioners for 20 plus years of how sometimes people who come here from other countries clearly can get diagnosed with a mental illness when really it's just them trying to assimilate and take all of the things that they experienced from what traditions and the culture that they came from coming into ours. It seems odd and they seem confused. And so also just knowing that you have to know, like always, everybody has a story. We have to know the whole story. We have to, that's the only way that we can, that's the only way to look at a person, I guess.
Bye, buddy. Hope you find your dad.
Which I think, is a good segue into this other part of the conversation, which is cultural norms in terms of diagnosing mental illnesses and how you assess someone for mental illness. Because as you see in this movie, kind of the backbone of the comedy in this movie is how, like I said, fish out of water, how odd Buddy is in the quote unquote like regular human world.
Right.
He's eating gum off of the street. He's trying, even though Santa Claus did tell him
in
not
Gotham.
to. He is trying to hug raccoons, then getting attacked, and I hope having a tetanus shot, and doing all of these things that makes him seem so odd. Yeah. Whereas it's surprising that he doesn't get picked up kind of in the beginning of this movie and get like put into an institution of some sort.
Yeah. Or like get the shit beat out of him.
Yeah. Like he's running into coffee shops and yelling and like all this stuff. And like per our understanding, like the human world understanding, he is behaving really oddly. He's not acting socially appropriate at all. No. And if we were to judge him through our microscope, through our lens, he would definitely be probably maybe institutionalized, but at least like assessed for mental illness and have something slapped on him that might not be appropriate, because you're not taking into context kind of what you were saying, Hannah, the fact that he was raised in a wildly different cultural environment.
Absolutely. And, I think Megan would be a good person to speak on this here because much like Buddy, Megan also moved from the happiest place on earth to New York at one point.
Oh, yeah. Gosh, seems like a lifetime ago.
I mean, it is a lifetime. We're old now. But Megan went from working at Disney to living in New York. So how do you think Buddy would have been perceived in New York City?
Oh, naive. I mean, really naive. You're living in this bubble of a little... that is a very great... that's a good analogy. I mean, living in a bubble where you have your routine and your friends and everything is fine and dandy. And, whenever you begin work and you clock in, you're considered on stage, and you're considered you're theatrical.
At Disney?
Yes, at Disney. And then, moving into Brooklyn and living with, my gay ex-boyfriend, which was something to be said. That was, and having this fantasy world of wanting to find Prince Charming and then moving to Brooklyn and living in a situation like, it's such an interesting spin, but Yeah, I probably would have lost my mind too in a way and gone into coffee shops and been super literal and thinking that was the world's best coffee. You know, you kind of lose your mind and your identity and just like, who am I? Am I going to be a cool New Yorker or am I a Disney freak? You know? So,
Right. That's a big culture shift, I'm sure.
Yeah.
You know, I've never been to New York, so I can't really speak to it, but of all the places in the world I've been, I've never been to New York, which I need to fix when, you know, the Rona stops making that impossible. But
it's
the stereotypes of it, I wonder like how true those are of the way people behave. Because, you know, downtown Chicago, no one like cares about your existence, but they're not likely to be openly mean to you. They're just going to ignore you.
Well, just going from Florida and the Sunshine State to New York, I mean, that right there is just so different. You go from a vacation spot to, I mean, I guess another vacation spot, but where it's, you know, hitting hard, the concrete jungle. It's just so different. But yeah, I guess in that situation, I was totally Buddy the Elf too.
I mean, you're basically Buddy the Elf.
Yeah. I will say to Buddy, I thought that the paper cutout banners that he made, remember that night when he slept overnight and he made all that was fantastic.
Yep.
Holy cow, that was so good. Yeah. Anyways, I was impressed with him. I wish I could hire him.
Yeah, all his decorating was fantastic in like both of his dad's apartment and in that department store like basement area kind of.
Yeah, his stepbrother and his mom, they needed someone like that to bring in some Christmas cheer and help out their family, and they needed that even if they were in New York, you know, bring that elf life there.
Because Buddy's definitely someone, if I was watching this in sort of a vacuum where I just didn't realize if he wasn't like from an elf place or something, like if I was just watching this at face value, he definitely seems like someone who is maybe possibly like on the autism spectrum disorder in terms of the fact that he can't really read a room. His social boundaries are very off. He can't really assess sarcasm or metaphor. Like he's very literal, kind of like Amelia Bedelia. If anyone from the 90s and any other like 80s, 90s kids know that reference. Like all his interactions with his bio dad are very like he's not assessing how curt and kind of mean his bio dad is, which you would argue also is him just trying to force a narrative onto his bio dad also. But he comes off as very, and he's also very young seeming. And so like, that's the kind of stuff like I'm meaning, like when you assess someone for a mental health diagnosis, you have to be mindful of his environment. Because I would assume like the elves, if I had to make an assumption, they're very genuine people and maybe very like wholesome people. And so they don't maybe use sarcasm. They mean what they say. You know, if something is the world's best coffee, that they really mean it's the world's best coffee. Maybe they don't have, it seems like they sleep in bunk beds and stuff like that. So maybe they're social bound. Maybe they're more like communal. And so they don't have like social boundaries the way that like say Buddy walking in when she's in the shower and singing with her. Maybe they don't have gendered bathrooms. Maybe they don't really think about gender, even though the women elves do wear skirts and the boy elves do wear pants. So I assume there's some acknowledgement of gender, but you know, all that stuff has to be accounted for before you would slap him with like autism spectrum disorder or even like an attachment disorder or, you know, because I think the prevailing thing with his personality is how young he seems. And also you could attribute that to the fact that he's 30 and he was talking about how Papa Elf didn't do something till he was 490. So it could even be too where like at the age of 30, even though he looks like a full grown man, is he still thought of as very young and treated as very young in the elf world. And being 30 is culturally very young in the elf world, which is maybe why he's still kind of in that very young age of development.
Right, and his level of mastery at the skills that they have would be so far below their their like realm of competence that they would probably be treating him like a baby trying to do their work, or like a young kid, like when you give them something to keep them busy and out of your hair so that they feel like they're doing something. You're like, that's great. You did such a good job. And they're like, yay. And they did, absolutely nothing to help you in any way, shape, or form. I feel like that's probably what was happening with Buddy. And like putting all of that into the culture of the elves versus the culture of humans, I think it makes a lot of sense as to why he wouldn't have fit in either place, because he'd been treated young his whole life and kind of had things, blinders on, and then you dump him in the middle of New York City where people see a 30-year-old man, where they, assume you're competent at most things and can behave normally and understand social norms, and he understands nothing because he's never had to do any of that. And that doesn't mean he has a mental illness in any way, shape, or form. Like if you grew up in a communal society and for some reason left, like you could expect there to be a rough transition.
Absolutely. Well, because it goes back to the idea of the identity piece. Of it's like trying to redo your identity without people around you that or feel connected to. I mean, he doesn't feel connected to anybody, I feel like, until he has that moment with Michael, his stepbrother, when they're in the snow fight. Like then he seems to feel a little bit more comfortable, and then they're like having a good time and like running around with each other. Like other than that, I don't think he really feels like anybody really understands, if he even thinks about it. I guess at the same time, he's so silly. I don't know if he would, but like talking about him as a serious person, like I feel like he probably feels, how do you start your identity when you don't have anything to look at? Which again would be similar to somebody who is adopted. When you don't have your bio information about your family, of like, where do I start this and how do I figure this out?
And you can see how it comes out in his attachment, in that he just kind of piggyback on what you were saying, Hannah, with his brother Michael, is that I think that's when he starts to also get like unconditional validation. Like his thank God for his stepmom. She is so warm and she's so unconditional, and she takes him. She's the perfect kind of parent figure for someone who is coming in from another background, where she never criticizes him. She lets him bring his, basically, I guess if we want to say like this cultural lifestyle into their home. He pours syrup on his spaghetti and she's like, okay. And she eats the food that he makes her and takes the spaghetti in a bag for lunch. And she never judges him or is rude to him about it. And I think she and Michael do a good job of starting to make Buddy feel like this is like my family, and in a way that obviously his dad isn't giving it to him. And you can see him respond to that, because throughout the movie, he's so desperate for his dad's validation. Like he's always saying, I love you, because he's wanting him to say it back. He's always like, look at this thing I'm doing. Look at this thing I made, in a very like little kid way, where they are wanting your attention and they just want praise from you so much. He comes off as very like starved, with his dad like wanting to dress like him. Like he's like very much like we've been saying, like an adopted child. Like he's trying to assimilate really bad, like hard, and he just is clashing so hard with his personality and his background. And then his dad just being so unkind about it, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely see him being unkind, and I think it's important too to consider where his dad may be coming from, because we look at him and be like, wow, Walter's kind of a dick. But when we look at what his position is and where he lives, he is an executive and has some guy show up to him acting like he's his son. What is he supposed to think?
Mm-hmm.
What would you think? Very interesting to consider too. But I mean, we know Walter's a dick because his son thinks he's a dick. But
no doubt.
Well, because Walter's also, he's very attached to his community, which is like corporate society, like fast paced, like profit based, capitalism, I guess. Like he like and sort of like his identity is framed around his work and probably making money, I would assume, and being that person. And we only kind of get this small window into his life in the course of this movie. This movie probably takes place over like a week, you know? And so he seems, very caught up in his work and making profits, and kind of, it seems like he's sort of maybe lost his identity because he's working in child books. So my assumption would be he got into child literature, I would hope, from maybe a purer place. Like if you pick to work in children's books, I would hope you'd be more the Meg Ryan character from You've Got Mail, and less the Joe Fox character from You've Got Mail.
Great reference.
Thank you. But he totally, like, I don't know, maybe he's like just lost his way. Because he wants to print those books that are missing 2 pages. He's like,
Doesn't give a
kids
fuck.
are stupid. They're not going to notice what do they want to know about a puppy and a fucking
Pigeon.
Yeah.
Pigeon. A puppy and a pigeon.
It's all like bottom line.
Right. Well, and we see how his boss treats him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, his boss is a maniac.
Yeah, he had like absolutely no concern for his
Anybody.
Yeah, and, like just no concern for their anything, and then he just demands that he's there. And like Walter did mess up, so his boss reprimanding him is fair because he was careless by signing the blank pages and approving that. But even still, you see when he obviously has like a family emergency, the boss is like, if you don't sit in this room, you're fired. And he's like, finds himself in that moment, but like gets the up yours comment. But you're like, wow, how messed up is that to have somebody be like, this person who's actually my son, verified, proven to be my son, that I'm responsible for, is missing in the middle of New York, which he knows nothing about. And his boss is like, nah, bro, your problem.
But I bet you that happens more than we think. I'm sure they're at that level of like corporate whatever.
Greed.
Sure. Or just when you get that high up in any company, I'm sure there is probably a certain level of, there's probably a lot of pockets in the community of like, I guess, callousness, for lack of a better word. And just like my time, I'm working really hard. I mean, it's that whole like mindset of kind of the pyramid scheme, the scam of like capitalism, I guess, which is, or just working hard. Like if I work hard, you should work hard. And then if everyone's working hard and everyone's staying like in the office on the weekends and everyone's working 80-hour weeks, like how normal that becomes in that culture of we all work crazy hard. So that should be expected. And like, I think even a story like my mom told me, no offense, Mom, if you listen to this episode, was like, it was really weird in her office. She's an accountant, because one guy didn't work through his lunch hour. He would read a magazine in his office and everyone was like, what that dude steal? And that guy was, taking care of himself. He was taking his lunch hour to kind of chill out. And because the culture in that office was to sort of like eat while you work, that was judged.
To kill yourself at your job.
So that was judged. And that's also like my mom noting that like that's not even her fault either. It's like she's just part of this culture where everyone does it. Yeah. So it's like how easy work-life balance can be tipped over.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and that's an important thing to bring into this too, is like how messed up the work-life balance can get. Like that's the thing that stood out to me. That was the first thing that we, like when we were talking about like, what are we going to talk about this movie today? I was like, man, we need to talk about the work-life balance, because I was watching Elf and going, beyond this movie making me really happy, what is something about it that sticks out to me that I feel like I want to relate to our audience and that I would want to relate to my clients, which is like the importance of work-life balance. Especially all three of us worked in a job where we saw what happens when the corporate machine gets a hold of things and tries to start demanding things, and how much the culture is revolved around just get it done. And, we don't care about yourself, because we'd be getting emails from managers at like 11:30 at night. And it was bananas. And I don't know, maybe Megan, maybe you can speak to this too, of like being the owner of a company, like what it's what it's like to try to manage that balance when you have the kinds of deadlines that you do, where you have to get all these bars decorated and do the vast majority of your work probably in a month.
Yeah, I recently had a dream about our worst nightmare, which is basically you have a client who wants something done quicker than what you're doing. She wants you to be out by 5. She's given you more things to do, and I've hired too many elves, so there's too many people that I have to try to give a job to. Some of them don't know what they're doing, but it's a seasonal job, so in some perspective, I mean, you kind of get what you get in some people, you know? I mean, it's hard to find people that can only need work for a month, you know, so it's hard to find elves all the time. So having to train people on the day while also trying to get out of there by a certain time, it's hard. I'm still trying to figure it out. So it's tough, but there's something to be said for people like Buddy who just know how to do things, and you just put them to work and they enjoy doing it. You know, it's like liking to Christmas decorate and also being good at it and being efficient with it. So it's a trifecta that we always strive to find, but it is hard with like having a seasonal business and that trying to find the balance of people who are good at it but also have the time. It's really hard to find.
I'm sure that is hard, and it's probably stressful on you to like figure out how you can set boundaries on your own time of like, I can't be in this person's house decorating till 11:30 at night.
Yeah. And
then up in the morning decorating these bars while they're at their low.
Right. And they don't want us there that late. So it's hard because we try to fit a ton of houses and restaurants within the month. Like you said, there's only one window of, you know, a couple weeks before Thanksgiving, maybe to like the first weekend in December. That's kind of the only time people want it done and want to pay for someone to do it. You know, if it's too early, it's Halloween. And if it's too late, it's basically Christmas time, and they've already wanted it up. So that's kind of the part of finding elves, so that we can sort of divide and conquer, because we can't be everywhere at every time. And so it's like, it's trying to manage those moving parts of finding more elves, but getting more gigs, but, you know, trying to figure out what would make them happy, make the clients happy as to when they would want their Christmas stuff up. You know, some people don't want it up until after Thanksgiving, and some people want it up November 2nd, you know, so it's trying to make everyone happy, you know,
which has to be extra stressful, because when we talk about like all 4 of us have at least at one point, if not currently, owned our own business or multiple, and also been employees. And I think that it brings a totally different dynamic when you're either in charge of something or you own your own, so you're really in charge and the consequences directly affect you, with how that work-life balance starts to eat into your personal time so much. And I think that like really wanting people to be able to stress recognizing how much of an effect that has on your mental health is important, because like when you're an employee, you know, like we get afraid that we'll lose our job, which it can happen, but we get so afraid that we lose our job that we start letting our boundaries be crossed and just accept we're not getting any more money for it. But the only reward for doing more work is that you're given more work.
And also, too, kind of based on what you were saying before, too, Ben, about like getting emails late at night, like especially if it's emails from a superior. And I'm sure you has experienced this also with like being a boss, is that like our phones and our internet and like the emailing and stuff, like it also has now created this facade, which this movie doesn't really have, of being
this is 2003, so
yeah. So they didn't really have like smartphones like we have now. And so now there's this facade of like being available all the time. Like you carry now your email in your pocket and your everything in your pocket. And so there is this, I feel the anxiety. I'm sure you guys feel this anxiety too, of like, I can read emails whenever. And so then when I see one, even if I see it accidentally, I feel like, ooh, should I reply? Now I'm thinking about it. And like, even the mental boundaries of that, of like, now I've seen an email that I wouldn't have seen if it just lived on my desktop. And now I'm going to think about this email all weekend and whether or not I should answer it, or if I shouldn't answer it, or does my boss expect me to answer it? And I think too, like your superiors, like they also help establish that culture. Like if they're sending emails late at night or on the weekends, it kind of normalizes this idea of like, they're doing it, so should I be doing it? And if they're always available, then I feel like maybe I should always be available. And clearly his boss, James Caan's, Walter's boss, is, well, he has the privilege of being the big boss, which I'm sure maybe he does everything on his own time, and he has great work-life balance for himself. But
right, he's the owner.
He's not thinking about the holidays, and he's not connected to the value of family, obviously, because he doesn't feel moved, like you were saying, when Walter is having a family crisis. And that indicates to me that he values work over family, because if he was a person who valued family, he would instantly be like, oh, go to your family. Oh, your kid is here. Don't worry. Go figure out what's going on. You know, we'll have your, like the other guys. I mean, there's like 5 people at that meeting. Like someone else could have gave the pitch.
I mean, I think if he was focused on family, he wouldn't have had a fucking meeting on Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
Like, I think that would have been where that started at. And I feel like, and I think that's just a really good point, that, so I just opened my own private practice this year, which has been incredibly stressful. And that it does become where everything is just together. And I think also uniquely because of coronavirus in general, that also everything being in the same setting is also just like a whole other piece of this. But I do think there's just it's hard to manage those boundaries when, again, I think that facade of we should always be able to be contacted. We should always be able to, you know, and I find myself responding to a text message from a client at like 8:00, and I shouldn't be doing that, because I don't want to give the impression that that is a normal, regular thing that's okay. And at the same time, it also, everybody's so freaked out right now that like, it also is kind of feels like, well, I'm not going to do it all the time. I'm just going to do it when the world is completely insane. But it's so hard to lean back into and remember like it's healthier for me. And it's that part of that. I think that's really hard with, especially when you're in the field that we're in terms of being therapists. We really have to find different ways to manage how often we're even just, again, that mental part, how much we're thinking about clients, and really being able to have a way to close that door so that I can take care of myself, so I can be able to see clients and be able to be present with them and give them what they need at the same time, and really, and how that's really hard. For me, it's been really hard to manage that right now, for sure. And so I think, I feel like, you know, if you work at a place, and that's what's so hard about it, because our healthcare is tied to work, right? So that's what's so hard about it too, is that's part of why I think so many people are in jobs they don't like. But when you work at a place where the boss is a fucking maniac like this guy is, the chances of other people being maniacs is pretty high, which means you're going to get yelled at and bitched at by other people. And so
you hire like hires like.
Oh,
like,
yeah, absolutely.
That culture perseverates, and the people who can't stand it quit. What do they say? There's no bad jobs. There's just bad managers.
Yeah, you just leave bad bosses. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And even, and like you were saying too, like how it bleeds into home. Like even at home, he leaves dinner to go work. And he goes and eats his dinner at his office, and you can see it's having a direct impact on his son, who also tries to leave dinner to isolate. And then you become a family system that isolates. And then also he asked his wife to take off time from her job to watch his adult son that is not her adult son. And what I appreciate, she's really the best character in this movie.
For sure.
And she firmly says,
she is.
No. She is a very self-actualized person, I think. Like, she's very loving, and she firmly just says, like, no, like, I'm going to hold a boundary, which is I have an important job. I have an important meeting. My job is as much worth as your job. And so I'm not going to do that. And she does it with a brevity as well, or a lightness that I really appreciated. Which also makes me think that Walter used to be a different person, because I can't see someone with her disposition getting involved with the person who started out the way he is right now.
Yeah.
No, she looks like constantly exasperated with him. I think that's right. I think like it's a good thing to look at when you're looking at someone like Walter is we get caught up in all of that because I get caught up in it too, and I didn't catch it till this time, having been a boss myself, like for years now, of like looking back at this and going like, Walter messed up, and they kind of gloss over that at the beginning of the movie, but like Walter deliberately did not do his work. Walter looked at that and went like, hey, you know what? I don't care what happened. Like you guys said, like, I don't care.
He's burnt out.
He is burnt out, but he's like, you think these kids care about this or that? Like what a pigeon and a puppy are going to do? You think they'll notice? We shouldn't pay $30,000 for that. And you look back and they go like, wait, how many of these books are you shipping? $30,000 is probably peanuts to this company.
Yeah.
In the Empire State Building? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So he made a selfish, maybe he's burned out, that could be possible. And burnt out people.
He's out of ideas as well. Like, he doesn't have any ideas. Like,
his writers don't have any ideas besides to hire another writer. Like,
right. Well,
when you're
they're
burnt
also
out, as I say, when you're burnt out, your quality of work goes to shit. And also your values become very skewed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They do. And, that was his boss's responsibility to be on top of that and be checking in with him. But where I find it's interesting is we find a lot of concern for it, but we also look back and go I don't know, dude, you deliberately didn't do your work and you got caught and you burned your boss because you didn't do what you were supposed to do and you caused a problem for him. And now he's coming down on you to fix it.
My counter argument would be that you run your employees so ragged that they make a foolish error and then they panic and then they try to just sweep that error under the rug, hoping that no one notices, which is a very anxiety-driven move. Mm-hmm. And then you get caught and then you get mad at them because the quality of the work has gone down, but the quality of work really has gone down because you are running them to death.
Wow, this sounds like the way we were treated by that corporation that held our contract at our last job, doesn't it?
Sure,
and
the fuck
I would also
does.
say that's the bottom line with a lot of things, right? Like, you have doing our work in general to make a living wage. And a lot of, doing many jobs, you have to work over and above, a lot of, like you were saying, Ben, if you work a lot, you'll just get more work. Then you just get, usually the reward is this weird, quote unquote reward where it's you're such a good worker. I think you could also handle this project and this project. And you think that praise is going to pay the rent and feed your face. And it's no, it's not.
And they don't pay you anymore. They just try to give you a plaque or say, good job. And that's going to but you're never part of the club, are you?
Mm-hmm. So it's made me, talking about this has made me much more sympathetic and empathetic towards Walter, which I didn't think I would be going into this conversation.
It actually makes me appreciate Buddy too, because not to talk about seasonal stuff again, but the fact that
it's a seasonal movie. You're good.
Well, yeah, but so for someone who does has a seasonal job, for that 1 month that we're really, really busy, we just want to work. We, it's work hard. And then in February, take a deep breath, but this is our time to shine, and the fact that Buddy was able to work hard, play hard, and he enjoys it. And he has so much passion behind it, man, he's an all-star employee in my eyes, able to enjoy it, working hard and having that passion of Christmas decorating. I mean, not to get cheesy, but you guys were talking real deep about Walter, but I mean, Buddy was really great too.
But I think what you kind of pinpointed there though is that Buddy is leading with his values, I think, still. Yeah. And in the work he does is he's doing what he's passionate about. He also can create his own boundaries for himself. He's finding time to date. He's finding time to get to know his bio family.
Perfect
he's doing things
balance.
He's doing that thing that not a lot of people can do because it doesn't fit into the work week really, or the normalized work week, which we should do away with because that was created by Henry Ford when he first opened factories, and it was not based in reality now, but where you work when you have the energy and the drive to work, and then you take a break when you naturally want to take a break. Like, he works all night decorating that place in the department store because he's in the mood, and then he does other stuff when he's in the mood for other stuff. And so he has the ability to be like fluidly creating his own work-life balance, like intuitively all the time.
Yeah, he loves it. He loves what he does. He's an elf.
Yeah.
But not really.
Just like you.
Yeah, right.
And I think it's an important thing for people who manage or run their own businesses, especially if it's like most of us, where you have your work and your side hustle, and maybe you have dreams of your side hustle someday becoming your full work. And when you own your own business and you're working for yourself, you get the benefit that all of the work you do directly results in the payoff and benefits your reputation, but also every mistake anybody else you hire makes damages that. And the work that you do is you. It's not someone else's job. It is you. And I'm wondering, Megan, in particular for you guys, since your business is a family business, it's just like that, where you guys bring in people to work, but this is your guys' passion. This is what you do.
Yeah, I mean, if it looks bad, we look bad, But definitely, I think that is. Can you repeat the question?
Yes, maybe.
Yeah, yes, I think that is super important, and it is hard to find people who can share the same likeness of yours and the same passion for yours, because it's not their blood, sweat, and tears necessarily. I mean, to them, it's just, all right, cool, I'm going to decorate for the day and then go back to business or go back to whatever they were doing. Whereas for me, it's like, man, if this doesn't look good, if it wasn't done on time, if someone was rude to the client, like it looks bad for us as well.
Yeah. And it's that sounds like it's a lot of stress.
Yeah, but it is. I mean, it is a lot of work, and it's hard to find people who have that buddy passion where they want to do it and they want it to look good because they also have that passion and they also enjoy it. It's just their own inner joy of having it look good for themselves as well.
Yeah. So I kind of put this out there to everybody is what are some of the things you wish that clients or other people who wanted to start a business or other people that are working jobs that have dreams of doing their own kind of thing, what do you think they would need to know that is something, I guess, to make my questions succinct here, so sorry.
No, sorry.
I do that sometimes. Ask questions and confuse myself. Sorry, my bad. But what do you feel like people need to know in order to help maintain the work-life balance that it took you a while to learn?
I don't know. It's kind of hard for me to say because it's not consistent. I mean, some months it's a lot more life balance than work. And other months like November, it's a lot more work. And so I don't really want to balance, if I'm being honest. In my job, I really don't. I want to work a lot and then I want to play a lot because I don't have a 9-to-5 job where I'm having to find that balance.
But then there's oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think that for fuck's sake, Ben, go.
Sorry. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Hannah. I'll stop. My bad.
Are you sure?
No. But go ahead. Anyway.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, Megan, with the situation that you're in specifically. And I feel like one of the things I've talked to a lot of clients about is figuring out what your values are and then working with that. And like, if you're a person that family is the most important thing to you, work a job where you can spend more time with your fucking family. Don't work a job where you're where you have to kill yourself to make any kind of anything. trying to figure out different ways to do that. And also how truly and really important it is to really try and find something that you actually enjoy doing. I mean, starting my own business is not something I've literally ever wanted to do. And I still kind of mad at myself that I'm in that position. But that's another topic. But even I lost my train of thought. Fuck.
I know it's Christmas, man.
Well, I would say something, I think, with achieving work-life balance, and it's something we touched on earlier, if you do start your own business or your own boss, is be mindful of compartmentalizing. And by that, I mean like having a set time where you turn everything off and you're done working, and then holding to that time, like holding that sacred to yourself. Like, just because I can answer emails at 11 p.m. because my work is also my home doesn't mean that I should be. Or even if I see it, doesn't mean I have to acknowledge it. And I think that's something that, like, all of us this year worked remotely for a certain amount of time. Hannah's been working remotely. I'm back at my place of work. But there was a time when I was working remotely, and it's amazing how quickly my hours spread out. My work hours spread out into my home hours, because there wasn't like, I'm going to work and get all my work done so that I can leave the office and go home and eat dinner. So then it became that thing where it's like, well, I can't eat dinner right now, so I'm going to go make dinner, and then I'm going to come back and do notes. And then I'm doing notes kind of on and off until like 9 o'clock at night. And then I don't really have like sacred, like set downtime. And so I think it's so important to carve out, like, these are my work hours, and be mindful with your clientele too. Like, this is when I answer emails. Don't expect to get a response outside of these hours. And kind of just establish those boundaries, because as soon as you normalize boundaries with the people you work with, like, then everything can be somewhat gravy. Like, you're still going to have people that are going to push those boundaries, but it's kind of your own fault if you never establish boundaries and then get irritated when people are hitting you up all times of day and night and getting upset with you for not being responsive. That's something more when I did private practice work on the side. Like, I had to be very clear, like, I don't answer emails on the weekends. And I only do paperwork from this time to this time outside of when I'm having you in my office. And so it's like having to be very clear and then stick to that, even if it makes you anxious. I'm a little bit more of a people pleaser, so I can kind of want to be responsive to please. And so it's kind of having to sit in the discomfort of, one thing Hannah told me many years ago when we worked together is, don't make their emergency your emergency. Just because someone's coming in with a lot of heat doesn't mean that you have to internalize that heat and react accordingly, because then what you're doing too is then you are normalizing for your, kind of what you were saying earlier, Hannah, you're normalizing for your clientele that I am always going to be responsive. And so then, like, if they do blow you up and you don't respond, that's on you if they get mad at you, if you've done it a bunch of times in the past. Yeah. Like, when you work independently, or if you're the boss too, you have to do a really conscious, mindful effort to set boundaries all over the place. I'm sure, Megan, that you probably have to do this with people you work with, is setting boundaries. Because that also infects like the culture of your workplace too, of like I have a boss right now who's really great because she's very clear about boundaries, and she strongly encourages us to have boundaries, which gives me the permission to create boundaries as an employee.
Yeah, I'm a people pleaser, and I don't really have many boundaries when it comes to clients. I went to a person's house on Thanksgiving to fix their tree, so I'm not one to really. I know, but that's where it's hard, because it's, the work-life balance. I want to work because I'm only doing Christmas for a month. Like, and oh man, on Thanksgiving, your Christmas tree doesn't work. Oh my God, I gotta fix that. That makes me look bad,
It's hard. Customer service is hard. It adds a whole nother component to it, and that makes it way more stressful. And you have to like give more of yourself and your time to the people, because if you don't serve them, they won't pay you. Right. Which adds extra layers of problems you don't have when you're an employee, but then you don't make extra money or get to do your thing your way. So there's trade-offs for sure. I think what I would say for people is that with like this work-life balance is that if you're doing things like Megan's talking about here, make sure that it's for you. It's for your business, for your bottom line, and for your interests, because work never ends. You can't get ahead of work. You can never catch up. They'll just give you something else. There will be another thing to do. It's never ending. You're never going to stop working till you stop working. And I think that making sure that you create space for yourself and for your life, and like Brittany was saying about like fiercely protecting your time, that's something that I have done for years. And like even in owning my own business, or being a contractor or being an employee or all of the above at the same time, is I always still have space for the things I want to do, and making sure that I fiercely protect that from everyone is the only way that happens. Mm-hmm. And I think that the thing that I would say to most people that I would want people to understand is that people treat you how you let them. They treat you how you train them to treat you. And if you protect your space and your time for, like, I work for you from 9 to 5. That is when I work for you. If you want me to work from 5 to 7, are you paying me more?
Yeah.
Because if you're not paying me more, then I'm not working.
Yeah.
Because this is a business relationship. This is not my life. Your company is not my life. And it will never be my life. And you will post my job. If I die, you will post my job before my obituary gets posted. And I'm not okay with that.
Yeah. Well, I think so. I remembered what else I was going to say, and I was just going to say that there is, that being a therapist for me doesn't feel like work. Like, it really doesn't feel, the notes and the paperwork and shit definitely feels like work. But the act of being a therapist is something that doesn't really feel like work, and that so much changes the way that it feels just in general. And so if you're doing something that you despise, because you feel like you absolutely have to, there's ways to change. There's ways to find the work-life balance that you actually want, and also how important it can be to find whatever that thing is, and that you don't have to change everything right away. It can be something slow that happens. So it's just a part of it, it's just a part of, in a lot of ways. And also take all your vacation time, for fuck's sake. Take your vacation. I have so many people I work with right now who are like, I haven't taken any vacations here. I'm like, why the fuck not? Take all your vacation time. You getting the rest that you need in between everything else will make everything else easier for you. This idea that we have to force ourselves through something until we're worn the fuck out, it doesn't work. It's way better to take a break and regroup, and then go back and do whatever it is you have to do.
Right. So
that's all.
I think we've said enough about that. I think those are all really great points. And I think that Hannah's fantastic point right there is.
Yeah, that was a great way to end on that note. I mean, definitely take your vacation days off. Yeah.
So when you
get paid for those, right?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. But when, so the last thing I wanted to kind of bring up with this is, like, I think that, or the last point we had in this that we set out was that looking at what we see in this movie, there's a lot of effort and focus on creating a Christmas spirit through the development of the environment in this film. We see it in the store. We see Buddy do it with his family's apartment. So I think having our resident expert here on that, why do you think it's so important for people to create that environment to get into the mood for the season?
Doesn't it just make you happy? I mean, really, you've got like the ornaments from throughout the years on a Christmas tree that's all nestled up in a room that you're always sitting in with lights on it and pretty colored ribbon. I don't know. I'm all about the ambiance. I always try to pick the best and the cutest restaurants. I don't care about how the food tastes. I usually care if there's bistro lights around or there's cute pictures on the walls. I'm just all about the ambiance. So with Christmas especially, it's all of your traditional trinkets that you've loved and have collected throughout the years. And I just think it's so important because it reminds people of what they're grateful for and what they've collected over the years, what their family probably has of too. So, yeah, I feel like it's very, very important. And I think that everyone should hopefully find time to find that work-life balance and decorate your home, and appreciate it. I think it's something to be said that people who make the time to decorate with stuff that they've loved and have collected is important.
Yeah, I think it is important. And I think it's really a helpful point you brought up of remembering like the attachment that people have to some of these items that they only see once a year.
Yeah, right.
But like, I think particularly for like the work you do, Megan, since Megan decorated, for our wedding, the room, like there's something to be said about when you change your space, when you beautify your space to look the way you want. Not that it has to be done for just the holidays, but when you change your space to look the way you want, I think that has an incredibly positive effect on your health, because then you've taken ownership of something that you can control in the world, which is your space. And if, like Megan, with your job, like you get the opportunity to see the look on people's faces when you have created that for them. You've turned their vision that you collaborated with them into a reality. And like, what do you see in their faces and their body language that changes when they see what you guys have done versus what it looked like when you started?
Yeah. They're grateful because it took a lot of time, and it was time they didn't have to do it for the first thing. So they're relieved. And they're excited to see the stuff that they've collected up, and it's done nicely. And they appreciate that we respected what they admire and have nicely put it up for them to look at all throughout the season. They usually it's always their style. So when we go into their house and we see their house and meet them, we get to know their style, their favorite colors, and everyone's Christmas is different. Everyone's home for Christmas is all so different. So it's always we feel so proud that we were able to find and see what they love and embrace it as themselves, as what they wanted. So I would say all of that wrapped up. It's Christmas, so everyone's already kind of in a good spirit and everyone's happy. And, this year was crap. So everyone's just happy to know that the year's almost over and that they get to be surrounded by pretty different things that they haven't had to look at all year round. Everyone went all out this year because it was like, what else are you going to do? Plus everyone's home.
Right. And it's like you said, like not the same thing I've been looking at every day in and out and for the whole year because I've been cooped up in this house since March. Yeah.
Well, I think it says a lot about how much our environment impacts our morale. There's a reason why we decorate office buildings and we decorate restaurants and we decorate spaces, because it has an impact on how it makes us feel. Like there's a whole field of psychology that's like, how do environments make us feel? And places have decorated because of that, like fast food restaurant. There's a story that I think maybe McDonald's did orange for their dining areas because the color orange makes people go quicker and get up and get out. And so it helps have a bigger turnaround in the dining room. And I don't know how much, how old that study is and how much water it still holds. But, places like we take stock of this when we create our environments and what makes us feel good. And I think Christmas is one of the times, or the holidays in general, probably starting in Halloween, is one of the times when I think we're the most mindful of how our environment makes us feel, when really we can do that all the time. I feel like Christmas also gives people an excuse to be more childlike, to be more whimsical, to be more, kind of fun and silly with both in how you are, but also your environment. I have tinsel hanging around. I have my bookshelf is outlined with Christmas lights right now and things like that. And And I think one thing that's really helped my mental health, or at least made my quality of life feel better, is similar to Buddy the Elf, is I started to recognize that, like, just because you're older, like just because you're a quote unquote adult, doesn't mean that your environment has to be like boring and beige and earth tones and big spaces that are open concept but don't have anything, and like, and just kind of just nothing, sort of like no, I guess, personality. And once I kind of realized that I can still put like glittery shit everywhere and colors everywhere, and like my apartment can look, I guess, whimsical all year round, it had and like my how I dress myself, even, it had a big impact on how much I enjoy kind of being an adult, if that makes sense. And I think like Buddy kind of embodies that in this movie of you can be a grown-up and still, or perceptively a grown-up, like how other people perceive you, and you can still be joyful and silly. And instead of the environment changing him, he changes his environment. Like, it's like he gives permission to the other people in the movie to be silly and vulnerable, and like everywhere he goes, like in the mailroom and in the Central Park, like he is a model for them versus him assimilating to them.
That's true, and he does that with his brother, and he does that with Jovi. Like everybody, everywhere he goes around, I think that's why I like this movie so much, is that Buddy does just that. He changes the environment. And I think...
So I guess what I'm saying is you can keep Christmas in your heart all year round.
I love it. I fucking love it. I love it. I love it. I feel like... And I feel like one of the things that I've been really focused on, and something I've been talking with clients about all year, is making your space as comfortable as you can. Like, I feel like that's something I've been working on during this whole time, of like really making my apartment feel really comfortable for me, and kind of leaning more into that. I can be, because I feel like for some reason we have these boundaries for ourselves around what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do. I don't really, and I think that's just a part of culturally assuming that we have to suck. I don't know. It's probably not the best way to say it, but whatever. So I feel like really leaning into the fact that you can do whatever you want with the space that you have. There aren't any rules around it. And how kind of liberating that can be, and how it makes a huge difference. I feel like since I've been working on it all year, I mean, it's like, as usual, half-assed done, like it always is. But that how it just feels more comfortable, and I feel less trapped than I think I would if I felt like I didn't feel like myself in my own space that I live in.
And kind of touching upon the work-life balance of it all, when I was working remotely, I talked to my therapist about how to create that boundary by changing my environment. And this is something that I stole from my therapist and then told to my own clients, which is when I worked, I had my harsh overhead lighting on because I did Zoom therapy, so people had to see me, I guess. And so then when my work hours, quote unquote work hours, were done, I turned off my overhead light. I turned on like my twinkle lights, and like I created a whole different, like I changed the whole lighting of my apartment. I kind of changed the space I was in, which is tricky because I live in a studio, and so there's not much space. I can't go from like my office or even like a bedroom space to like a common space. And so I had to be very mindful of how I used my environment to shift my morale.
And I think that's huge. That's the crux of this. And I think that's what, like people like Megan can do, and why we have designers, is that sometimes we need someone to help us see, and someone who has that kind of vision. I will tell you flat out, and Megan will tell you flat out, I'm extremely stubborn about it, but
extremely
I don't have that vision. That sight is something I do not have. But
Benjamin, are you telling me that your truest self, if you could live authentically, would it be some sort of like recreation of the like Millennium Falcon or something in your own home?
I don't like the look Megan is giving me right now.
So you wouldn't be just like fully Star Wars out in your own home, and you would just be like in, I would assume, some sort of rocket ship bed.
Yeah.
If I had to guess.
like a race car bed. It would probably be the Batmobile.
Yeah, but like a rocket ship.
But like an X-wing, but like it's an X-wing or
Right.
something.
So
I think
Megan,
it'd be so interesting to see what all of our homes would look like if we truly tapped in and accepted our inner child instead of what we think things are supposed to look like.
I think my apartment would look like Barney Stinson's, where it'd be probably pretty clean decoration, except for a stormtrooper in the corner. But I don't know. I see Megan disagreeing with me. Megan is best friends with my wife, so.
Oh, they have such different
If you
tastes.
know, you
It's pretty
know.
funny. Yeah. Yeah.
I have this feeling that I'm just wrong, and I'm lying to myself right now. I think that's the look I'm getting from all three of you.
Oh man. Yeah, you are stubborn with your home decor looks. Just your stuff all over. Different conversation. Different conversation.
Self-burn. I set myself
Yeah,
up for
you
that.
did.
But all right, so like I think just it's important for people to cover that decoration, because I think like even the private practice office where I still work and Hannah and Brittany have moved on from, but I think what we could definitely cover with that is that when Megan redid my office, like Megan's company redid our office, and once we did that, it made everything feel so much better that like it looked updated, it looked modern. When you guys did like the change, like it made me feel happier to walk in there. And I think that that's just something we need to be mindful of in this year where we can't control anything at all. And we're stuck in our homes, to remember that control your space. Do the things that make you happy in your space. And if you need help with that, hire someone like Megan to help you if you have no vision, who can take care of, like the vision part of you, and you just tell them what you want, and then you get a wonderful result. And if you guys want to check that out, what's your guys' Instagram?
Ben, you're so good to me. Thank you. And you know what? New year, new everybody. I also organize, which is a very important part too of mental health and getting things done and being more productive, and also having it look better. But you can go to my Instagram, Ultimate Elf, and it is www.theultimateelf.com. That's us. But no, awesome. Ben, you are always so kind to always, speak so highly of us, and we have so much fun decorating. And, like Buddy the Elf, we just love to do it, so we don't really care about a work-life balance. But we should find one. I mean, we should. What I hope is that you guys keep getting enough work that, that's something you have to create, because you guys do. Your home is awesome. Your mom's home is awesome. The work you guys do is great. And I'm just so happy that you joined us to talk about this. I think with this movie, what we're going to do now is like a little different because I think other than Walter, I don't see anybody in this movie that has a diagnosis. Do you guys?
No. I mean, there's definitely like environmental stuff, obviously, but I don't think anyone, maybe just adjustment disorder all around, but not necessarily, because Buddy does a good job of
adjusting.
I don't know, being authentic, but also adjusting.
Yeah.
I would say the only thing I would say in terms of like treatment would be, like I said before, the way that Mary Steinberg's character approaches Buddy. That's how you should have, because I'm a child therapist, but I do a lot of parent coaching. And so part of, how she behaves in this movie is what I would coach a parent to do, which is be unconditional in your regard. Like, of course, set boundaries. He does kind of trash their home. I don't know if I would have let him destroy the furniture the way that he does. She really does kind of almost let him go too hard.
Yeah.
But I think her attitude towards him is very good. Like, even when he destroyed the TV stand to make the rocking chair, you can say like, that was a very beautiful rocking chair. Just something to let you know moving forward. If you do want to use something in the house, if you could just ask me, I'd really appreciate it. Like, you can set boundaries in a firm, gentle way while also being positive towards what the kids are doing. And just like, don't shame him for anything. Like, don't shame the kid that is in your home who's acting Buddy-like for anything they're necessarily doing, because they don't know any better. And to like be cruel to him is unfair. And it's also not helping any kid be a better person.
No, and I think that's all like really good points. And like as we look at that, none of that represents any mental illness. Like
No.
maybe adjustment disorder, like you said, but in the interest of like dealing with stigma, we talk about so many movies where we see such like obvious examples of something's wrong here. But in this movie, I don't think we see that. Despite Buddy being such a fish out of water, there is nothing in him that I think I would feel comfortable diagnosing with the information we have. What I see is a person who comes from a totally different culture, being forced into a situation that's unfamiliar, but it doesn't seem to cause him distress.
No.
So I wouldn't say that. I mean, he looks a little weird. Like he's obviously uncomfortable. I don't think anything rises to the level that it causes disruption in his functioning, because he starts to assimilate and adjust his behaviors pretty quick once he learns to understand the differences between the real world and the North Pole. And we find him, like getting, like he doubts himself sometimes, but I think that's none of that rises to the level of mental illness. And I just want to make sure that sometimes when we see movies that we cover that too, where we go, you know what? That's not a mental illness. That is situationally bound and is normal. That is a normal reaction to an abnormal situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it makes me want to give some credit to Papa Elf. Like, he must have been really kind to Buddy. Like, he was a good adoptive dad. I mean, he didn't, like we said, we kind of shit on him for how he kind of kept Buddy's birth story, I guess, from him and birth identity. But other than that, he must have given him a lot of positive, like unconditional positive regard, because Buddy seems very happy to be his authentic self. Like, he seems very centered in who he is, for all the, even though we spent a lot of time shitting on that at the beginning of this episode.
No, but I'm really paying attention to the way he was interacting with him, even when he was talking to him about him starting to be his apprentice and like stuff like that. So I feel like he's really patient. I feel like he is really patient with him. So yeah. So yeah, I feel the same. And because I feel like even from a family, really quickly, even from a family point of view, like it's there wouldn't be anything else that I would want to work on with them.
Mm-hmm.
No, they move through everything kind of on their own.
Pretty much resolves.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything kind of resolves by the end. Like, maybe you could argue family therapy for Walter's family and his wife and stuff, but he seems to have come to the other side of it by the end.
Yeah.
I agree. I think I just think that this movie resolves nicely. It's such a perfect Christmas film because it goes through the conflicts and everything resolves happily, and it stays kind of in a lighthearted mood, even though it covers like the emotional journey of the characters. So why don't we move into final thoughts here? So
sure.
Our final thoughts on the movie.
I love this movie. It's a classic for a reason. Oh, sorry. No, I'm just going to say.
You can go ahead, Megan. Go ahead.
We can have your final thoughts. You're the Christmas person.
It's a classic for a reason. It's holly and jolly, and it's decorated beautifully. And I love it. And I love Will Ferrell. He's so funny. There's so many great one-liners that he comes up with that I still see all over the place. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'd say this movie is legit funny. I haven't watched it maybe in like 2 years. I was trying to think, like, I don't know if I watched it last Christmas, though I feel like I do watch it every Christmas. When he got hit by that taxi, so rude of me that really felt a real laugh out loud moment for me. But no, like, I think what I appreciated watching it is it really does a miraculous thing of being both appealing to adults, but also being something you can watch with children. Like, they really are careful about the Santa mythology. They're really, they definitely are like, it's a PG vibe without being so squeaky and clean that it doesn't appeal to adults. It really is genuinely funny without having to be like dark. And so I think it's like a perfect Christmas movie for all ages. It definitely keeps aging well. And it makes watching it now, it's so clear. And even thinking of as therapist, it's so clear why it's become a classic up there with like all the other Christmas classic movies.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I love this movie. I've watched it like 3 times already this month, I think. Yeah, it's one of my favorites. I love Will Ferrell, and I don't know, it's just a fun movie, and I really enjoy it, and I'll probably watch it 100,000 more times in my lifetime, I would imagine.
That's the real test of a good movie. On this podcast, isn't it? Whether Hannah will never watch it again or she watches it 50 times.
Mm-hmm.
No in the
that's
middle
true.
with Miss Hannah.
You got that
Nope.
fucking right.
I'll go. So, like I said in the beginning, I love this movie. I think it's just a perfect Christmas film. It's my favorite of the modern flavored ones, because the other ones all had some degree of nostalgia to them. They all operate in a time that's not ours, or they were filmed in a time that wasn't ours, and we're just watching the movies our parents grew up with. And I feel like this was the first one that really happened in our generation.
Home Alone.
Well, okay, I'll give you fair. Home Alone would be a good point. But I think that, this is the first one that like happened when we were like teenagers, where we'd be able to get like the blend of humor, not just the stuff like aimed at kids. But this one came out, I was 18 maybe when this came out.
This movie's 17 years old now.
I know, but I love this movie, and I will probably watch it several more times. My wife and I watch this and Bad Santa every year, and just like laugh and cackle and delight and sit and watch this. So I'm glad this movie exists. I love Jon Favreau's work. I think everything he's done is pretty much amazing, and
He's a dream.
he is. But that's all I have on this. So what I wanted to say here is that thank you all for listening to us and letting us get through 50 episodes. This is crazy. We're wrapping up our 3rd season with 50 episodes. Thank you guys all so much. And please make sure to like, share, review the podcast, and thank you, Megan, for joining us here. And
Thanks for having me.
Megan, and be sure to tell everybody where they can find your guys' work on Instagram and stuff, so that they can take a look and see all the awesome stuff you guys do at The Ultimate Elf.
At Ultimate Elf and www.theultimateelf.com. I can't wait to see you guys. Thank you so much.
Oh, sure. And you can find us on Instagram at Popcorn Psychology, Facebook at Popcorn Psychology, Twitter at Popcorn_like. Also, we do a really horrible job of shouting out our Patreon. We do have a Patreon. We never talk about it really. And so if you want to give us the gift of becoming a patron, you can find us at Patreon under Popcorn Psychology. If you look for us, you get different, there's different benefits at different levels. If you become a patron for $50, you get to pick an episode too. So keep that in mind. And happy holidays, everybody. See ya next
Merry
year.
Christmas.